We're going to try to speak the English language today.
Hi everyone, welcome to a special masterclass with, and I'm so excited to say this, with the guy who is the author I have been reading the most in the last 5 years. Stephen Kotler wrote many of my favorite books, including Abundance, Rise of Superman, Stealing Fire. Stealing Fire as a book was so influential on my life, we actually made it the theme of one of Mindvalley's A-Fest. We made the theme Altered States of Consciousness, and it was inspired after I read your book. So it's such an honor to have you here, Stephen.
It's great to be with you, Vishen.
And we are filming this in Tallinn, Estonia at Mindvalley University. Stephen just addressed a room of about 640
people. They were people. I know you were thinking farm animals, but no, that was the last A-Fest. I was talking to the sheep and the goats, but this time it was 640 people. We have stepped up our game. We're actually talking to real humans this time. No more with the farm animals. We've changed their lives. Now it's humans.
So guys, as you can see, this masterclass is going to be wicked funny as well. I love Stephen's sense of humor. And every time I mess up, he jumps in. But Stephen, other than being a brilliant writer and apparently a comedian, I also want to tell you a little bit about, for people who don't know you, why it's so significant to have you over here, okay? Because your list of accomplishments is just ridiculous. So I'm going to read the official bio. Stephen Kotler is regarded as one of the world's leading high-performance experts, New York Times best-selling author, an award-winning journalist. He has been nominated for multiple Pulitzer Prizes. He's appeared in 100 publications, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Wired, and even Time magazine. He has written 8 amazing books: Stealing Fire, which was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize; Tomorrowland; Bold, which was called a visionary roadmap for change by an American president, Bill Clinton. The Rise of Superman was the most talked about book in 2013 and the first book to land on the New York Times bestseller list in sports science, psychology, and business simultaneously. He co-authored Abundance, which spent 10 weeks on the top of the New York Times bestseller list and appeared in the prestigious Best Book of the Year list. And by the way, those of you who have known me for a while, in 2013, on Mindvalley, I declared Abundance my favorite book of the year. And back then, I didn't even know Stephen. And get this, and this is the thing I love most about Stephen Kotler, he runs Rancho de Chihuahua alongside his wife, which is a hospice care special needs dog sanctuary in the mountains of northern New Mexico. How cool is that? Despite everything you do, you love your chihuahuas.
I do love my chihuahuas. It's pretty fucking cool.
So let's get started with this masterclass, guys. So Stephen, firstly, so excited to have you here on the Mindvalley set. I've been reading your books for years, and as I mentioned earlier, Kotler's books are, he's probably the author I've spent the most time reading in the last 5 years. But what I love about you is that not only are you incredibly ridiculously smart, but you've got this beautiful story that so touches people. It's a story of Lyme disease. And before we get to the teachings on ferocity, I really would love for you to share that story with our audience.
Well, thank you. You said some nice things about my books. I appreciate that. When I was 30 years old, I got Lyme disease, and I spent the better portion of 3 years in bed and pretty much lost everything. Bankrupted myself trying to find a cure. The woman I thought I was going to marry, all of it sort of got taken away. The job I had spent a decade getting, and
Lyme disease, for the people here who are outside
for
the
anybody who
US.
doesn't know, Lyme disease is it's often described as the worst flu you've ever had crossed with paranoid schizophrenia. So physically, you're laughing, but it's true. The most common misdiagnosis for Lyme disease in the world is paranoid schizophrenia, because it gets into your brain, and the hardest part about Lyme disease, it's physically debilitating.
And it comes from the bite of ticks.
Of a tick.
Right, the
yeah,
bite of ticks.
Physically debilitating. I couldn't walk across a room, but cognitively, it was crushing. My short-term memory disappeared, my long-term memory, I would hallucinate. I couldn't read because I couldn't focus. I'd get to the end of the sentence and forget what was at the beginning of the sentence. My ability to work, to make a living, was reduced to about 45 minutes a day.
Wow.
And after about 3 years of this, the doctors had no idea if I was ever going to get any better. And they had pulled me off medicines. My stomach lining started bleeding out, sort of in a reaction to the antibiotics, and there was nothing anybody else could do for me. And I just made a decision that I was going to end my life. I was going to kill myself, and to me, it was a practical decision. I figured that the only thing I was going to be from that point on was a burden to my friends and my family. I had moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and I got sick on my move to Los Angeles. I had just moved in with a woman in Los Angeles. That went away very quickly. Taking care of somebody with Lyme disease is not easy. But after about 3 years of it, I was really gonna kill myself, and I had a bottle of sleeping pills and a bunch of booze, and like that's how it was gonna. And it was really a question of when and not if. And in the middle of kind of all this darkness, a friend of mine showed up at my front door in Los Angeles, and she demanded that we go surfing. Which it was a ridiculous quest. I knew how to surf. I had surfed 5, 6, 7 years ago. Wasn't ever great at it, but I knew how to surf. But I could barely walk across a room. The whole idea was ridiculous, and she wouldn't leave my apartment. She kept badgering me and badgering me and badgering me. And after like 3, 4 hours of this, I was like, what the hell? Let's go surfing today. I can always kill myself tomorrow just to get her to shut up, anything. And I was so sick. I so remember this. They had to take my friend and we got one of my neighbors, and they literally had to sort of walk. They took me under each arm and they walked me to the car. They put me in the car. They drove me to Sunset Beach, which if you know anything about surfing in Los Angeles, it's the wimpiest beginner wave in the world. And they gave me a board the size of a Cadillac. And the bigger the board, the easier it is to surf. And then they literally had to take me by the elbows again and lead me out to the break. And luckily, into the water, it was a tiny day. The waves were terrible. No real surfer would have been in the water that day. But it was warm and the sun was out, and I sort of got onto the board and I was balanced there and a wave came. And muscle memory, which isn't a real thing, but we call it muscle memory, took over, and I spun the board around a couple times and I paddled and I popped up to my feet, and I popped up into a dimension I didn't even know existed. It was the strangest experiences of my life. It was like immediately through the rabbit hole, and I popped up into this dimension where I felt like I could see out of the back of my head, like I had panoramic vision. I was having an out-of-body experience, so I was hovering above my body. And the weirdest thing about the whole experience was time had slowed to an absolute crawl, but I felt amazing. I felt alive. I felt great. It was the very first time, and it was like the possibility of possibility. Like I had totally lost sight of what life even felt like, what normalcy even felt like, and so just like that taste of it, it was such an astounding experience. I ended up catching 4 more waves that day, and after the 5th wave, I was disassembled. I was done, right? They took me home, they put me in bed, they had to bring me food. People had to bring me food for the next 14 days because I was too sick to literally get out of my bed and go to my kitchen, which was, 50 feet away, and make a meal. Couldn't do it at all. And on the 15th day, which is the day I could walk again, I convinced one of my neighbors to drive me back to the beach, and I did it again. Because I had this amazing, and again, I didn't know what it was, by the way. I didn't have the technical term flow at that point. I just had this crazy, wild, altered state experience. And over the course of about 6 to 8 months, where the only thing I was doing differently in my life was surfing and having these really crazy out-of-body, outside, altered state experiences, I went from about 10% functionality up to about 70-80% functionality, and which sounds amazing, and it ended up being. But at the time, I'm a hardcore rational materialist, right? I was a science writer, right? Like I didn't have quasi-mystical experiences, and I certainly didn't have them in the waves. It sounded like the flakiest, freakiest thing in the world to me, right? And I was almost embarrassed. I wouldn't talk about what was going on. So Lyme disease is only fatal if it can get into your brain. Right? It's the only time it'll kill you. And even though I was feeling better, I was absolutely convinced that the reason I kept having these experiences is because the disease had gotten into my brain. So even though I was feeling better, I was absolutely certain I was dying and that I had a very limited amount of time left. And I sort of lit out on a giant quest to figure out what the hell had happened to me. And what I quickly learned a couple of things. The first was that these experiences had a name, right? A technical name. We called them flow states. And we had figured out that at that point, this was in the early thousands, neuroscience had sort of caught up with the study of consciousness enough that like the foundation was laid. Like I was like, oh wow, we knew the neurochemicals that showed up in flow, they reset the nervous system and they boost the immune system. Lyme disease, any autoimmune disease, is essentially a nervous system gone haywire, especially over time if it's chronic, which mine was. So by resetting my nervous system and pumping me filled with like neurochemicals that boosted the immune system, the flow had sort of healed the Lyme disease. And it's not just me. Herb Benson at Harvard, who did a lot of the kind of the foundational neuroscience on Lyme, he said that most so-called cases of spontaneous healing seem to have flow states at their heart for this exact reason.
So you were accessing these states when you got on that surfboard. You ultimately healed yourself of Lyme disease, right? For which I believe there is no known cure.
There is no known cure.
Right,
yeah.
but you healed yourself of Lyme disease and you became fully functioning. Now, how long did that take? Because you'd had Lyme disease for 3 years.
How long
since you started surfing?
So I got 0 to 80% was that 6-7 month span.
Wow.
80% back to 100%, that was another 5 or 6 years of work.
That's incredible.
That took a while.
That's incredible. But this is how you got obsessed with these states, and this is what made you eventually end up creating the Flow Genome Project, writing Stealing Fire and Rise of Superman. It was because you actually were so wrecked as a human being. You were about to take your own life.
What I quickly realized, like after I figured out the medical stuff and whatever, I started to realize that the same experience that had gotten me from seriously like subpar back to normal was helping normal people go all the way up to Superman. It's the same mechanism, right?
Right.
So I started to realize, this was the first moment I started to realize that a lot of what we think about as peak performance is about states of consciousness much more than skill sets.
States of consciousness much more than skill sets. It's a really, really, really important idea, guys. I want you guys to write down. A lot of what we think about peak performance have more to do with states of consciousness more than skill sets. Now, speaking of which, let's talk about ferocity, because that is your newest work.
Yeah.
And you've said that ferocity is the other side of the equation of flow. Let's put it all together.
Yeah, so we've spent, at the Flow Genome Project, spent a really long time kind of training up people in flow. And it turns out we're really good at training people up in flow. And when you're dealing with kind of the best of the best in the world, elite performers, the flow is enough. Like you add that into the equation, it takes them over the top, right? It's how you take top 5% and put them into top 1%. But what I started to realize, and became clearer and clearer over time, is there's a lot of foundational high performance things. And it's stuff nobody wants to tell you. Everyone wants to sell you 3 things you can do Monday morning. They're really easy, they're really quick. And that's not the truth at all. The truth is that, and you know this because we know a lot of the same people. So if you see the best of the best, the world's elitist performers, spend any time around them, they all seem to have an extra gear, right? Like everybody else is sort of dithering out at the starting line and you're like, what the hell? It looks like magic when you see it up close. And it really does, has that feeling of a magic trick, but underneath that, sure, they're doing some stuff with flow, and that's part of the equation, but they've managed to kind of line up all of their intrinsic motivators, everything that could possibly motivate them. So they've managed to get all of their biology to work for them. They've automatized risk-taking, they've automatized motivation, they've automatized grit. And what this means is peak performers all seem to have the ability to automatically, to effortlessly rise to a challenge before they even realize they've risen to the challenge. And I'll give you an example, I bet this has happened in your own life. So if you're a downhill mountain biker or a skier or something like that, you ski a really fast run, when you get to the bottom, your brain will give you after effect images. It's all the stuff that scared the shit out of you along the way, but you were moving too quickly. So your brain is still processing that information, right? You just went through a horrifying experience, right? But you were successful, and then you're getting the after effect images. The best of the best, they go through a day, and it's the end of the day, and they're talking to their wife, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their mother, whoever. And honey, what'd you do today? And you start listing everything, like this is what I accomplished. And all of a sudden you realize that like life threw you like 30 problems in a row, and you didn't even...
You just solved them all without realizing it.
You move through them, and because what happens is, if you actually stop, and life is so challenging, especially if you're really interested in peak performance, if you really want to go after your dreams, the stuff you have to do is so difficult that if you were to stop and actually think about what you were actually doing, if it wasn't automatized, if it wasn't instantaneous, the fear would get in the way. You could never get past your own fear. You'd never get out of your own way. You wouldn't get where you weren't going because your biology isn't working for you, right? William James called this the habit of inferiority. He said that most of us never get to live up to our full potential because we're not in the habit of living up to our full potential. And what he meant is we are, in a certain level, hardwired for mediocrity. We're hardwired for survival. And maybe a couple steps above that, we're not hardwired for holy fucking shit, this is amazing, right? And if you want holy fucking shit, this is amazing, I cannot believe what my life is offering me, you have to lay in whole new sets of habits. You have to take all the hard stuff and automatize it. Otherwise, you're just going to get in your own way and you're never going to get where you want to go.
So, Stephen, what is the habit of ferocity?
The habit of ferocity is foundational peak performance. It's about lining up all of your fundamental motivators, everything that motivates us, which is quite a list. It's autonomy, mastery, purpose, passion, curiosity, pride, money, etc., fear. These are all big motivators, and the best of the best have managed to stack them up and get all their motivators to work for them, to maximize momentum, to maximize speed. On top of that, they've learned to automate risk-taking and automate grit. And not just, most people think about grit and they think about perseverance, this one kind of grit, which is fundamental and it's critical. There are 5 other kinds of grit, and you have to automatize all of them so you make your grit reaction, your grit response.
And you're using the same definition of grit as Angela Duckworth.
So this is where it started. Angela has a great, Angela Duckworth, who's at the University of Pennsylvania, brilliant psychologist, and she defines grit as the intersection of passion and perseverance, which is true. Those are both very, very critical. But if you talk to elite level performers, if you talk to Navy SEALs, if you talk to world-class athletes or world-class businessmen or world-class artists, you're going to find that there are 4 or 5 other levels of grit that they all train, that they all think about, that they all work on, and that are missing in the passion and perseverance equation. So yes, you need passion and perseverance, but it's not enough. It's not going to get you A to B.
And now you've also said that the reason you need this grit is because when you were writing the book Abundance, you were interviewing all of these superstars, and you realized that no matter how successful they get, they still are continuously going through a huge ass kicking every single day.
Yeah, I think this is really challenging for a lot of people. I think, and again, we talked earlier about how most of us are hardwired for mediocrity, right? Part of that hardwiring is that the truth of the matter is if you really want a meaningful life, right, you're always going to be pushing a little harder and pushing a little harder and pushing a little harder. The ass kicking never stops. It doesn't get easier. We have this idea, and boy, did I want to believe this idea, that like once you get to some level of success, whatever level it was, right? First I thought it was when my first book came out, or when I was a successful journalist, or whatever, when I got married, whatever it was, it was going to get easier. Somehow I was going to wake up one morning and be like, oh, I can just do the work and I don't have to no, the ass kicking never goes away. In fact, it ramps up and ramps up. In a sense, the habit of ferocity is a way of kind of being able to take that ass kicking, which is always going to keep coming at you, and turn it into challenge and turn it into excitement. It doesn't come in like an ass kicking. Instead, the challenge comes in and you're like, look what I get to do next.
I like that. The challenge comes in and your default response is,
I'm into it. And not only does a challenge come in, you're literally and you've seen this, best of the best, they're halfway through the challenge before they've even realized that there's a challenge. Right? And you have to do that because the fear, the fact that it's not fair, the fact that you're still working hard, the fact that it's still this difficult is crippling. It's soul-sucking, right? That it's that difficult, that it's that challenging. So if you can actually get into the challenge and get through it, think about it this way. When you go to the gym, right, the workout itself isn't that hard. It's getting to the gym, it's getting the thing started, right? So if you can automate motivation, automate risk-taking, automate grit, right? It's like by the time you're conscious, you're like, oh wow, what am I doing? You're already halfway through the workout. You're already into the easy part.
So the habit of ferocity is essentially automating motivation, automating being able to access these states like flow, automating grit so that you can do your best in the world.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. So it'll do all kinds of crazy. It'll turbocharge productivity. It'll improve the quantity and the quality of work. It'll do all that. But this is really the path to a life of meaning. Nobody wants to talk about the amount of hard work that's required for actual meaning. They think that personal growth and personal development is enough to get you to a life of meaning. Personal growth, personal development will get you to the starting line, not the finish line. You still have to automate all these things and then turbo boost the whole equation with flow. That will get you there.
So what you're saying is personal growth, the right kind of personal growth, might get you to the starting line where you know what you're meant to be doing, right? You know about that new business you want to build, or this venture you want to take on, or that book you want to write. But ferocity is what gets you to the finishing line. Right? It's what gets that book out. It's what gets that business out. Because when you're trying to do something big, inevitably, you're going to hit road bumps.
Well, so think about entrepreneurship, and you know this as an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs fail on the third problem, right? Start a company, it's going great, it's going great. First problem shows up, and everybody rallies around, oh, we're going to, right? And then a month later, that second problem shows up, and you lose the weaker members of the team. That's when they go away. And by the time you get to the third problem, that's when you're like, oh my God, this is really going to take everything I've got, literally. And T.S. Eliot said that. It costs nothing less than everything, no less than everything, which is what meaning actually costs. It's going to take everything. That's the point. That's how you have to. Jung wasn't wrong, right? You have to go through that tunnel of darkness to get to the meaningful life. The ferocity, the habit of ferocity is what drives you through that tunnel.
Now, because of that word ferocity, I think a lot of people think that this is mostly meant for men, right? But I think you've said that actually the people who benefit from this, the subgroup, is women working in a creative job.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I don't want to say it's the only subgroup, but I do think the requirements of creativity and femininity, and let's not even talk about sex, let's just say the requirements of creativity and femininity on any level, it's a softer, more emotional, you have to be open to that stuff. There's no other way to do it. And it's great for creativity. It's great for getting in touch with yourself. But the reality is you get your ass kicked, right? You've just opened yourself up to tap into your creativity, and now you're going to get your ass kicked. You have to, and when I say ferocity, I don't mean aggression. I'm not training people up on how to be more aggressive, right? Skip out into the ring and punch them in the nose. That's not what we're doing here. It's about learning how to always be attacking your own life. The habit of ferocity is exactly that. It's sort of teaching you to be in attack mode, but you're not attacking the world, you're not attacking anybody else, you're attacking your dreams. It's teaching you how to kind of always compete with yourself and win. People will always compete with themselves, but they often end up kicking their own ass. This is how to compete with yourself and win.
Phenomenal. Okay, so I want you guys to take out your notebooks because Stephen's now going to go in as much detail as he can in this masterclass on 3 strategies to bring in this power of ferocity. So the first strategy is turning curiosity into passion.
So if you want to automate motivation, it's a 5-step process. And I'm just going to walk you through step 1. It's interesting. If you're interested in cultivating passion, which is sort of at the heart of motivation, is the foundation you want to start with, passion is actually a word that begins with P.
Yep, ladies and gentlemen,
Stephen Kotler, folks. Stephen Kotler. So next comes A. And then the ass. You start with the pump, and you add the ass. That's how you get ass action, right? You want to call. All right. So if you want to automate motivation, the place to start is with passion, and passion actually begins with curiosity. Curiosity is the basic ingredient in passion. In a sense, in the same way that passion is the basic ingredient in motivation, curiosity is the basic ingredient in passion. So if you're hunting a passion-fueled life or want to build a passion-fueled business, you need to go through a 5-step process that I talk about. I call the passion recipe. But step 1, make a list of 25 things you're curious about. 25 things that really kind of catch your attention, hold your attention a little bit. Underneath that attention, you've got neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine. These are pleasure chemicals. They're also focusing chemicals, and they're kind of the foundational ingredients in passion.
So we focus on what fills our passion.
What's great about passion and curiosity and all these motivators is focus, intensity, and productivity comes for free. Those are hard things. When we're fundamentally in alignment, when all our motivators are stacked up, all the stuff that's really hard about high performance, intensity, productivity, quality, quantity of work, all that stuff, you get it for free. It's the byproduct, right? It's why you want to automatize and stack up motivation. But passion itself is built out of curiosity. So if you're interested in cultivating passion, the place to start, step 1 in this 5-step process, is make a list of 25 things that you're curious about. And by curious, I mean you got a free weekend, you're willing to go to a couple lectures, read a couple of books, a couple magazine articles, watch a TED Talk or two.
So let's actually give this exercise to the audience, right? If you guys are listening, think about 1 or 2 things that you're ridiculously curious about.
Not 1 or 2. Think about 25.
Think about 25.
Things. 25 things.
But
come up with you want a full list. You want to sort of surround yourself, right? You want to get a really good picture of yourself because you're looking.
But I mean, right now, just so you're activating your mind, just think about 1 or 2, and then come up with the other 23 when you're done with this masterclass.
Oh, he's right. What he said. Don't listen to this guy.
So let's do this exercise. So, for example, I'm fascinated by Mongol history. It's weird, right?
I don't think it's weird. I think it's...
You're judging me right now, aren't you?
No, I'm just thinking that you're fascinated with like the oppressor who overran your country. I mean, okay. Prisoner's Dilemma much?
I've been reading all of these books on like Genghis Khan and Mongol history. The second thing I'm passionate about is puppies.
Mongol history and puppies.
So we have a list of 25. What next?
So step 2 in this process is a single curiosity, puppies, isn't really enough to hold your attention over the long haul, to keep you focused over the long haul. It's got energy there, right? Might be willing to give it a weekend, but if you can find the place that puppies and Mongol history intersect, right? Genghis Khan's secret puppy fetish, his secret puppy harem that he traveled everywhere with. Little known fact. Alien technology built the pyramids. Oh, I'm sorry. Puppies?
Well, maybe I can give an example of this. Because I actually, just before walking into this masterclass, I was actually speaking to 500 kids just at auditorium here at Mindvalley University.
Show off.
And thank you. And what I was talking about is how their passions can intersect, right?
Yeah.
And I explained how when I went to engineering school, I wasn't really into engineering. What I was really into was performing arts.
So I never drive over a bridge built by this man. Lesson 1.
So I loved getting on stage and being in Shakespearean plays and stuff like that. I also loved photography, and I was also obsessed with meditation. Now these sound like really
divergent
things, but look at Mindvalley today, and you'll see that we are a meditation company. I get on stage and I speak about meditation, right? And my passion for performing arts allows me to bring a great public speaking style. And then I just want to add the final dot. Photography, if you notice something about Mindvalley, like our events, there's such great photography, and that is also because I was obsessed with photography as a kid. And so would that be an example of how a number of our passions can intersect, and you can use that to fuel our business?
So when this started stuff, I talked about Lyme disease earlier, right? And where this stuff started to come together for me, exactly like the story you just told me, what was I super passionate about at the time? Surfing, because it had just saved my life, right? Peak performance, altered states of consciousness. And I had a long kind of lifelong fascination with sort of what you could call the science of spirituality, what's going on inside the brain when people meditate, all those kinds of things. And they all came together in my book, West of Jesus. So when I was writing this book, even though I had been so sick still, because I was coming out of the Lyme disease, I was so fired up because I had found a place that all my passions were intersecting, that like what was an hour-a-day work session, because I was so sick, was stretching out into 2, 3, 4, because there was so much fire in the belly.
And it helped bring you out of that disease.
Helped me bring me out of it, exactly, for sure.
Wow, so passion is almost like a superpower.
Passion is a superpower. The difficulty that I think that most people have is, A, they don't realize that it's the intersection of multiple curiosities, not just one thing, right? So they don't know that, and they also haven't automatized, passion's the first, curiosity and passion are the first of a couple of motivators. You gotta stack in 6 or 7 more to really be able to keep this going over the long haul.
So that's step 1 of stacking motivation. And of course, folks, there's a step 2, a step 3, a step 4, and a step 5. But with the amount of time we have in this masterclass, we're going to go deep into step 1. And the other steps, you'll find them in the Habit of Ferocity quest with Stephen Kotler. But more on that in a bit. Now, Stephen, as we were talking before filming this masterclass, you said a really beautiful line, which I want to bring back. You said the age of one-act lives is over. It died in the 50s. In today's world, we don't have one particular job or one version of ourselves. We could have 7 or 8 different careers or versions of ourselves.
Yeah, you look at the data, even on millennials, right? The data is they'll have 5 to 6 jobs by the time they're 30, right? Go back to the 50s, you went to work for IBM, that was your life. You were done, you were set. In the modern world, we have first acts, second acts, third acts, fourth acts, fifth acts, the things I've been obsessed with, and especially for creatives, for anybody who's doing anything creative, for anybody who's living a passion-fueled life, you're gonna have to reinvent yourself over and over and over and over again. You're gonna have to keep rising to the challenge, right? So if this stuff doesn't get automatic, if you're not automating the habit of ferocity.
And because of this constant reinvention that we have to do in the modern world, it makes the habit of ferocity even more important.
Oh, it's fundamental.
These reinventions are sometimes going to like kick us in the butt. And now, how does the habit of ferocity help someone as we go through these reinventions, these disruptions?
It's a great question, and I think it's what gets us through the disruptions. The habit of ferocity essentially automates motivation, risk-taking, grit, all these different elements, even flow. It builds structure around them, and it's a foundational structure that once it's in place, it's the thing you need to do to rebuild. It's the thing that you need for reinvention. And once the habit's laid in, meaning you don't think about it consciously, it happens automatically. So I always say that I've studied people who go after capital I impossible. What does it take to do the impossible? What does it take to do things that have never been done before? But the only way to get to capital I impossible is through small I impossible. And small I impossible is, what do I believe is impossible for me? Mm-hmm. And if you can tackle enough small I impossibles in a row, that's how you end up tackling large I impossible. That's the only way forward. So the habit of ferocity is about giving you the tools you need to constantly shock yourself. Not just about a life that kind of meets your expectations, but one that exceeds your expectations. When you look around and you're like, holy crap, how did I get here? This is amazing. I can't believe the life I built for myself. That's what we're aiming for here.
Now, if you'd known this information when you went through your disruption, when you basically lost your career, how would things have been different?
Honestly, I think I would have shaved 5 years off. Like each time I've had to rebuild my career, it's taken 5 to 7 years to really do it. And I think I would have shaved 5 years off of it. There's still hard work that you have to go through, and there's still some suffering and some difficulty and some challenge, but it would have cut that time in half.
Much time.
And I would have enjoyed the process much more. That's the other secret.
That's the key thing, right? Enjoying the process. Let's go on to the second strategy here, which is an interesting one. It's the power of autonomy.
So we were talking earlier about stacking motivations. And this absolutely starts with turning curiosity into passion and passion into purpose, which is sort of the 5 steps of the process that you talked about. There's 2 additional steps. When we study intrinsic motivation, so there's extrinsic motivation, things that are outside ourselves. So extrinsic motivation are fame or sex or money, right? And it turns out when you study motivation, you find that kind of those external motivators are useful only up to a point. Basically, what we need is to find a way to make enough money that we can pay all our bills and have a little left over for kind of self-expenses. And at that point, happiness and money absolutely split, right? The motivators that come into play after we've sort of paid our bills and taken care of basic survival things are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this is Dan Pink's research. This is a lot of different people's research, and it's fantastic. But there's a fundamental question that nobody talks about, which is, okay, great, autonomy is a motivator. First of all, what the hell does that mean? And second of all, how much autonomy do I actually need, right? Nobody really talks about it. They're both interesting questions. So, and they also get mystified, right? People like to make things into passion gets mystified into a much bigger deal than it actually is. Passion matters because we pay more attention to those things we believe in. It drives focus. And first of all, as a side bonus, flow has a bunch of triggers. So if you want to kind of turbo boost any process, you want to be tapping into flow triggers along the way. Flow follows focus. It can only show up when all of our attention is in the right here, right now. So all the flow triggers drive focus into the present moment. Passion is a flow trigger. We pay more attention to those things we believe in. Autonomy is another flow trigger. We pay more attention to those things when we get to choose what we're doing, right? We like steering our own ship. If you think about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, autonomy is the desire to steer our own ship. Mastery is the desire to steer it well, and purpose is the desire for the journey to matter.
Wow,
right?
I like that.
So autonomy is the front edge of this stack, and you absolutely have to strive for it. Now, by autonomy, I don't mean you have to absolutely be an entrepreneur and work for yourself and all that kind of stuff. Maybe, but maybe your dream job is actually working for Google or working for Mindvalley, or right? You could go to work for somebody else, but you need to be able to control your own fate. And the question I started asking is, how much autonomy do you really need to kind of stack this motivator? And it turns out, nobody's looked directly at this question, but there's a lot of really cool indirect evidence. So, for example, Google has tapped this motivator famously with their so-called 20% time. They allow any engineer who works for Google gets to spend 20% of their time, so basically a day a week, working on a project with their own desire, their own devising, right? And this is an incredibly powerful tool for Google. It really works. In fact, a couple of years ago, probably 8 or 9 at this point, I don't remember who did it. Somebody wrote an article about how Google had killed off 20% time and it wasn't working, right? And Wired went, I don't think that's true, and they did an investigation. And the article that they resulted, the headline was, Google couldn't kill 20% time if they tried. That's how baked in and important it was to the culture. So what do we know? We know that you can tap autonomy with 20% of your time. That's what Google taught us. Right. But it turns out Google took their idea from the company 3M that had been doing this since the 60s with 15% time. So, and this is 15% time gave us Post-it notes, gave us a ton of some of the best 3M
Post-it
inventions.
notes were among the inventions that came out from that 15% free time that these companies had, where their engineers could pursue anything that fascinated them, that made them curious.
Exactly, the intersections of their curiosity, right?
Right.
Now that's interesting, and we're going to come back to that 15% in a second. Patagonia, the outdoor retailer, they make clothing for skiing and surfing, and et cetera, is often top lists of best place to work in America. They've tapped into this stuff as well. They were very, when they built Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard and some of their early C-suite executives were very motivated by Csikszentmihalyi's work, sort of the godfather of flow psychology. So they built their company around a couple of foundational high-performance principles, one of which was autonomy. And the only autonomy Patagonia employees get, they get two things. First, they get to make their own schedule. So why is that a big deal? You get the autonomy to control your sleep schedule, which is really important because sustained high performance, if you really want to build up this habit of ferocity, of rising to every challenge, you can't do it sleeping 3 hours a night. It's not, you're going to burn yourself out. You know this, right? You grind yourself into the ground. You actually have to get enough sleep, and you have to control your sleep schedule. The other thing that's important about that is you can't, your chronobiology, your own internal clock. Some of us are extreme larks. I start working at 4 o'clock in the morning because that's when I'm most alert. My wife is the total opposite. She's a night owl. She doesn't actually start working till 5, 6 o'clock at night. So if you can control your own schedule, you A, can control your sleep schedule. B, you can control when you're working. So you can start your work day when you're faced with your hardest, most challenging task and be most refreshed, be most productive, Right? So you're getting your biology to work for you instead of against you. So that's the first half of what Patagonia did. So the other thing that Patagonia did is, it's obviously a company filled with outdoor athletes. It's founded by Yvon Chouinard, a big wave surfer, rock climber, built the headquarters right on the Pacific, and he has a house rule: let my people go surfing.
Right.
Right? And the idea here is, not only do you have the autonomy to make your own schedule, you have the autonomy to go surfing whenever you want to. So you could be in the middle of a meeting, you could be on deadline, project is due, doesn't matter, you can go surfing. This sounds weird. It matters for two reasons. One, too complicated to go into now, though I talk about it in the Quest, surfing is packed with flow triggers. So it's a high flow activity.
Right.
So he's giving his employees the autonomy to chase their highest flow activity, and surfing is exercise. And remember, at the start of this, we were talking and I said, most people are trying to train up skills and they need to be training up states of mind. Exercise automatically switches our state of mind. Right, it start 20 minutes in, you get what's called exercise-induced transient hypofrontality. It means our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that is generating our inner critic, that nagging, always on defeatist voice, gets very quiet. It's the front end of a flow state, right? So that happens automatically. You've just tired the brain out a little bit. It shifts your consciousness. Right? You're going from beta waves down to alpha waves. It's a consciousness shift. At a baseline for autonomy, you're looking for exactly what Patagonia gave their employees, right? Make your own schedule so you can control your sleep schedule, you can control your productivity, you can start work when you're at your most productive, you can chase your highest flow activity, and you can get the exercise you need to reset your consciousness. You want to take it one step further, aim for what 3M was doing, 15% time, right? So that's one day a week. It's just really about an afternoon a week or an hour a day. So that's what you're aiming for.
But what do we do if our company doesn't give us this benefit?
Get up early, stay up late, negotiate with your boss. One of the things I always
create that space.
Yeah, create that space. One of the things that
and what if we are in business for ourselves?
Well, that's getting what you do in that 1 hour time is chase mastery, which is the next of the motivators. But we're not going to have time to go into that today.
Right. And I think, Stephen, where we can apply this in our lives is that if you are like most people in the world today, and you're working for a job that doesn't feel fulfilling. And if you're in that category, you're working for a job that just doesn't, light up your passions, what you're saying is you want to set aside an hour a day of autonomous time, your time, to focus on your passions. And as you start doing this, you start lining things up and finding the next big thing in your life. So is that how this comes together?
Yeah, so according to really recent research that Gallup has done, 87% of people are disengaged or actively disengaged on the job. And active disengagement, my favorite euphemism, it means I hate my job so much I'm going to go out of my way to sabotage my company.
That's active
disengagement.
Oh my God.
Literally,
wow.
was my favorite euphemism. It means that 13% of people are actually living on purpose. They're living the lives they want. The habit of ferocity is how you join that 13%. I think it's how, as a globe, we make it 14, 15, 16. It's a ridiculous state of affairs.
And that's why this program is so important to us. So think about that, right? And by the way, that study was done internationally. It wasn't just in the US. 87% of people dislike their jobs. And one of the reasons why we wanted to create this quest with you, Stephen, Habit of Ferocity, is because it really helps both sides. It helps the 87% because as you go through this, you start not just finding the intersection between your passions and thus discovering what you're meant to do in the world. So it doesn't just get you to that gate. Once you get to that gate and figure out what you're meant to do in the world, it now gives you the tools, the rest of the tools to get to the finishing line where you can pursue that passion and overcome any road bumps that come along the way, right? And back to autonomy, one of the ways to get there, one of the ways to get to that gate, to get out of that 87% is to set aside autonomous time every day, an hour a day, to focus on your passions. So when I was working in a really, really, really bad job in San Francisco in 2003, and I wanted to escape, I was setting aside an hour a day to study meditation and mindfulness and to get certified to teach. And it took me about 10 months before I could break away from my career and pursue that. But it was an hour a day. And 10 months later, I had my big break. I had my second act. And really, this is about, if you're on that 87%, you got to get to your second act. And now when you get to the second act, the other tools within the habit of ferocity start kicking in, because now you learn to fiercely chase those goals and overcome the inevitable road bump.
The whole point of this, right, everything we're doing is, when I say stack motivators, not only are you stacking motivators, there's a very precise order that you want to do this in to maximize benefit and just for ease of use, right? These things, they're challenging, but if you can get them in the right order, it snaps them into play. You start gaining momentum and it's not as tough of a fight.
I want to get to strategy 3, which is be the best when you're at your worst. In short, grit.
Most people, when they think about grit, they think about perseverance. And that's the only kind of grit that they have. And it turns out, if you really look under the hood at grit and kind of break it down and really look at the neurobiology of grit especially, what you see is that there are 2 precursors to grit that are mandatory, and then there are 6 different kinds of grit that you need to train. And what's sneaky and unfortunate perhaps, they all have to be trained independently. You can't stack them together. They all have to be trained one at a time. And one of them that you really see in peak performers, and they really train independently and you don't see elsewhere, is the grit to be at your best when you're at your worst. So I'll give you an example from my own life.
Be your best when you're at your worst.
Let me teach you, how do I train this, for example? When I have to give a speech, okay? I'll write the speech, I'll practice it a couple times out loud, I'll do it for my assistant, and then I will pick a day when I'm exhausted, like I didn't get enough sleep the night before, and then I will work hard all day long, right? Put 10, 12, 13 hours in. Then I'll go to the gym and work out as hard as I possibly can. I'll come home, I'll grab my dogs, we'll go hike up a mountain in the backcountry behind my house, and I will do the speech then. And if I can do the speech when hiking up a mountain after an exhausted day, I know I've got it down. And you laugh and you're like, oh, that sounds crazy extreme. But I fly all over the world to give speeches in really high pressure rooms where I'm jet lagged and I haven't got sleep all night. Maybe I haven't gotten proper meals and maybe 1,000 things have gone wrong. And I got one shot to really nail this content. And so if I hadn't done that kind of training, I can't tell you how many times this has saved my ass. And it's the same across the board. So you see this with peak performers. They actually practice being their best when they're at their worst. And unfortunately, the good news is it's remarkably easy to train. The bad news is you actually have to be at your worst to train it, because what you have to do is you're training down anxiety. It's not that, by the way, that level of performance gets any easier. It's that you can remove the fear from it. You can know that you can actually perform at your best when you're at your worst, and that's what allows you to rise to the occasion. Simple ways to train this. I'll give you a way that I took out of action sports. So as an action sport athlete, one of the secrets to sort of staying out of the hospital is, how do I maintain my balance under conditions of exhaustion? So every time I go to the gym, I do my normal workout, and then I end my workout with sort of some intensity sprints, usually on the rowing machine, jumping rope. And then I got on a balance board, an Indo board, and I force myself to stay on it for 10 minutes without it touching the ground. So I have to maintain my balance under conditions of absolute exhaustion. And as a guy who's broken 80 bones along the way, I can tell you, once I started doing this, I stopped putting myself in the hospital. I was training myself to be my best when I was at my worst. Same thing with creativity. Creativity is incredibly difficult when you're exhausted. The neurobiology, the brain, sort of, the more tired you are, the more anxious you are. The more anxious you are, the more you're putting norepinephrine into your system. Norepinephrine shrinks the size of the database searched by the pattern recognition system. So say you have a problem to solve and you're looking for really creative solutions. If that database has shrunk down because you're tense, right, you're never going to get to the solutions you need, right? And this is basic neurobiology. And the example that everybody's familiar with is the fight or flight response, right? When we face acute fear, the brain limits our choices to 3: fight, flee, or freeze, right? The same thing happens under any conditions of anxiety. It gets smaller, our options shrink the more anxiety there is. And obviously when we're at our worst, when we're tired, when we're not energetic, we're things are going on in our life. We've been fighting with our spouse or our kids, or take your pick, right? You have to train yourself to be your best when you're at your worst. There's no other way you're going to do it. The Navy SEALs have a saying. They say when you face a challenge, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. And that's because when fear gets introduced in the equation, it limits our options. So you're going to get what you train. So you absolutely have to train being your best when you're at your worst. That way, when life keeps throwing challenges at you and challenges at you and challenges at you, when you're exhausted, you've already automatized rising to that occasion. So it's going to happen automatically. You're not going to have to think about it.
And I know this is a framework that you outline in The Habit of Ferocity.
It is a framework, and the grit to be your best when it matters most, or when you're at your worst, is only one of 6 levels of grit that you actually have to train. But they have to be a tight stack so you can get through this stuff and get on to the next challenge.
That's fantastic, Stephen. I learned so much from this conversation. So I want to attempt to summarize based on my notes to the people who are watching. So the first thing is, you learned about this concept called ferocity and how personal growth will get you to the gate, right? Personal growth might help you find your mission. It'll get you to the gate. But then, that's just the starting line. And there's an ending line that you have to get to. And between the starting line and the ending line, there are going to be barriers. And I think, Stephen, you were saying that in your research for books like Abundance, when you speak to these incredible individuals like Branson and so on, they're constantly running away from something while running to something, right?
Yeah.
And ferocity gets them there.
Yeah, this is something I've seen over and over. The best of the best are always kind of running towards something just as fast as they're running away from something. And you need that double motivation. You need actually way more than that double motivation, right? But that's sort of the grit to go right at your fears, that's a different kind of grit we're talking about, but absolutely.
And so the first strategy that we spoke about was basically finding your passion. And the exercise that you were given was to make a list of 25 things you're curious about, find the intersection between them. You can go and do this exercise after the masterclass, or those of you who enroll in the quest, we're going to guide you through this exercise and all the other steps. And it's a 5-step process. We covered step 1 over here. The other 4 steps are in the quest. So the first one was finding your passion. That gets you to the gate, right?
Yeah, turning curiosity into passion is just the starting point.
Then we spoke about the power of autonomy. 87% of us are in jobs where we are actively disengaged or disengaged. 87% of us. But we should also remember that the days of one-act lives is over. It ended in the 50s. Today, if you're in a crappy job, it doesn't mean that that's going to be your life. There's going to be a second act and a third act. You want to change acts as fast as you can. And we change acts by applying the power of autonomy. And you spoke about how if we are disengaged with our job, set aside an hour a day where we can look into our passions. Just like I switched my career and ended up starting Mindvalley because for 10 months I set aside an hour a day where I can go deep into mindfulness and meditation and figure out how to build a business around it. And all of us can apply that hour a day. Just take it away from your Netflix time. Now, third, you spoke about grit and the importance of grit, okay? And I know grit, that you go so deep into grit. There are 6 types of grit, and there are ways to build it up, and each one has to be trained separately. And you kind of now have an idea of grit. Those of you who want to go deeper, a lot of that's going to be covered in The Habit of Ferocity. One of the key things that you're going to get out of this quest, other than finding that purpose, that direction, and then being able to accelerate towards it, is that you end up 5xing your productivity. You literally become so much more productive. But here's the thing. You're becoming productive in the right direction. This is not becoming more productive at the job you hate, at the career you want to get out of. That's a recipe for disaster. This is about finding your compass, going in that right direction, and then magnifying your productivity there, would you say?
That's exactly right. You're going to 5x your productivity towards your dreams. This is about lighting a fire that's going to fuel you for the rest of your life.
And in the quest, you're going to learn how to automate motivation, how to automate flow, how to automate learning and creativity. So you actually end up learning more and you're more creative, and how to bring in grit into your life. And grit is really the requirement for achieving a life of doing the impossible. The impossible, as Stephen said, with a capital I. So here's what we're going to be covering. You're going to learn how to turn curiosity into passion, passion to a lifelong purpose. You're going to learn how to set high, hard, and clear goals. You're going to learn how to create a lifelong high-performance routine. And you're going to learn the perseverance to create a life of ultimate performance, personal success, and transcendent meaning. So before we move on to the rest of the masterclass, I'd like to share with you a couple of things people are saying about Kotler's work. The Washington Post said, Kotler does a great job of explaining the science. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to work with him. He genuinely brings in science. The famous Jason Silva, futurist and host of National Geographic's Brain Games, said, Kotler is more than just a brilliant writer. He is the guy you want to have a transcendental conversation with. Howard Bloom, the neuroscientist, said, it's difficult to think of a writer more invigorating and tuned in than Kotler. Recode said Kotler is a generous and wise tour guide. His enthusiasm for his subjects is infectious. And, I loved working with Kotler because in everything we were filming, his enthusiasm would just propel me forward, and it made working with him so much fun. And get this, Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States, gave him an endorsement for his book Bold, which he co-authored with Peter Diamandis. Clinton said, Bold is a visionary roadmap for people who believe they can change the world. Now, if Clinton isn't big enough, Elon Musk, founder of SpaceX and Tesla, said this about Kotler: abundance is essential reading for anyone looking for a better tomorrow. And let's not forget Richard Branson, who said, abundance provides proof that the proper combination of technology, people, and capital can meet any grand challenge. And Kotler's also received praise from men like Ray Kurzweil, the famous director of engineering at Google, and a guy considered one of the smartest men alive today. He said, a must-read for anyone interested in seriously raising the level of their game. And finally, Ariana Huffington, who said, it's a reminder of the infinite possibilities for doing good when we tap into our own empathy and wisdom. So, with endorsements like that from a famous scientist, from a US president, from the Elon Musk, you know that Kotler's work is going to be absolutely game-changing. So let's move on to the rest of the masterclass. So think of it this way, right? At the end of this quest, and this quest is how many days?
It's spread out over 5 weeks.
So 5 weeks. At the end of this 5 weeks, you'll be able to answer the following question. I want you to ask yourself, can I answer the following question honestly, right? And the question is, are you doing everything you possibly can to become the greatest version of yourself, to achieve the impossible, to close the gap between your inferior and your fully realized self? Are you doing everything you can? And if the answer is no, I think this quest is really going to help you get there. Okay, so I'll give you an idea of how the Quest functions. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Mindvalley's Quest platform. Quest is one of the highest performance online learning platforms in the world. And the reason for that is because online courses don't really work very well these days. I think the completion rate in an online course is about 8% globally across all online courses. Wow. Now, with Quest, we're seeing completion rates that can get all the way up to 80%. That's like a 10x improvement. And the reason it works is because Quest works almost like a game. It's only 20 minutes a day, so it's micro-learning. So anyone can fit these ideas from Kotler into your lives. 20 minutes a day. Some of these you can listen to as you're driving. You can watch it on the Quest app on your Apple TV. You can watch it on your tablet or your computer. It's everywhere. It's on all devices, but it's 20 minutes a day, right? Most Quest users, they start this, they wake up, they might go to the gym or meditate, and then they tune into Quest and they do their 20 minutes. 20 minutes a day stacked up over 5 weeks creates a behavioral shift in you, because everything we do in Quest is designed to shift behaviors. So this is one of the reasons why the program has such a high completion rate. But there's another magic ingredient. Quests are done with a community. Everyone starts together, goes through it together, crosses the finishing line together, and we're all going to be connecting with each other in a Facebook group and through the app. So what happens is that you have people going through the same lesson with you on the same day, supporting each other. And my God, the Mindvalley community is so supportive. If you get stuck anywhere, just post a question. If you're having a frustration in life, just post a question. Dozens of people will reply and help you. It's amazing. And that's one of the reasons why so many people who do our quests actually find lifelong friends within these quests. And then they want to come and move to a city together, which is why we're here in Tallinn, Estonia. We have 1,000 of our students living here for 30 days, and Stephen was just addressing them, right? That's how powerful this community is. So many of you who are interested in enrolling in the Habit of Ferocity, all you got to do is scroll down below this video, and you'll be able to enroll in the program. And note that as a special thank you for staying with us as we went through this masterclass, you get a special unlock bonus on this page. So you basically get to enroll in this program at the best price available anywhere. Do not close this page because it only is unlocked when you get this far in the masterclass. Now, one more thing I want to say is that all our programs on Mindvalley not only get among the highest scores in the industry, but we're so confident about how powerful these programs is, you can enroll in this. And if at any point you feel this isn't right for you, send one email to support@mindvalley.com for a full refund. So let's give you an idea of what this quest involves. Let me break down the weeks for you. The first week is going to be about onboarding. Stephen is going to set the stage and introduce you to one of his core concepts, which is flow. When you get to week 2, we're now going to take you to level 1, which is called the passion recipe. It's on automating motivation. Could you tell us a little bit about this, Stephen?
Passion recipe is a 5-step process for turning curiosity into passion, passion into purpose. It lines up it's the basic level of motivation that you need. You're going to have to build onto that to maximize momentum, but what you really want to do is you want to stack and align all of your possible motivators. You want to get your biology working for you and not against you.
That's amazing, because once you find that passion, it fuels everything else. Now, in week 2, you're going to get to an advanced method of goal setting, and you're also going to learn how to automate flow. Tell us about this.
Most people actually, they know a little bit about goal setting at this point, but goal setting technique is tricky, right? Not every goal works, not all goals work together, and there's actually 3 layers to it that with purpose at the top, and the passion recipe will get you to purpose, and then you need high hard goals, and these have to be well tuned, and then clear goals underneath it. And this stack, the research shows, will give you an 11 to 25% boost in motivation simply by getting it right, on top of which it will also increase the amount of flow in your life. And depending on whose numbers, right? McKinsey found that flow in top executives produces a 500% boost in productivity. Our research 500% boost in productivity, in creativity and flow, we see a 400 to 700% boost in creativity. Motivation numbers, these are huge step functions worth of change. So while this quest isn't totally focused on flow, more flow is going to be the byproduct of it along the way. So I like to say that everything in this quest is sort of foundational high performance, but it's also going to teach you how to turbo boost the entire equation with flow.
Phenomenal. So now when you get to week 4, it's going to be about automating grit.
And risk-taking.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're automating grit and risk-taking. We're teaching people how to de-risk the risk-taking. So we're training up risk-taking while also giving them secret skills for de-risking the risk, because you don't want your ass hanging out.
Right.
You know, you want to train this up. You're going to need it, but you don't want to be totally exposed along the way. What we're really going to do here is there are 6 different layers to grit, and most people only know about 1 or 2 of them. So we're going to lay out all 6, and we're going to stack them up nicely. In the same way that we stacked up motivation, we're going to get grit into a tight stack, and we'll have automated grit and automated risk-taking. So your ability to rise to any challenge just goes through the roof.
And finally, in week 5, as we come to a close, we go into creating your own high-performance routine.
Yeah, this is itself the habit of ferocity, right? We're going to take everything we've learned and construct it into a series of high-performance routines that will guarantee that the habit of ferocity sort of stays cemented in your life. It becomes foundational, upon which everything else can be built from.
This is going to be so much fun and so powerful. And I know some of you may want to bring this into your business, into your company. I know that you've been brought into companies like Google, and you've boosted their employee engagement and productivity. What was the statistic that you were able to do at Google?
Yeah, we did a 6-week training at Google not too long ago. It was a joint learning exercise, and we trained them up in kind of 4 basic high-performance foundations, some of the stuff that's covered in the habit of ferocity, and the use of 4 fundamental flow triggers. Again, we'll be tackling similar information inside this quest, and we saw a 35 to 80% increase in the amount of flow in their lives.
In these people who work for Google. Yeah. That's impressive. Congratulations on that. So Stephen, for the people who are watching, who are ready to enroll in this program or might have some questions, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions just to get your response on this. So the first question, Stephen, is why now? Why is ferocity so important in today's world right now?
I think there's two answers. I think the first part of it is that if you really, really want a life that exceeds your expectations, you need to be ferocious. You need to train up this extra gear, and it's nothing people are talking about. It's not super sexy, it doesn't sell really, really well, but it's foundational high performance. And it's a foundational level of, I'm gonna break down the neuroscience, I'm gonna break down the psychology, I'm gonna break down the physiology, I'm gonna get to the basic level of the tools so you'll know how the system works and be able to work with it, first of all. And I think why now? The era of like the single act, the one career life is over, right? Success in today's world is about first act, second act, third act, fourth act, fifth act, sixth act, right? It's constantly requiring self-reinvention. And if you haven't trained up this habit of ferocity, you're gonna get eaten alive along the way.
Right, that's beautifully said. Now, in the program, you mentioned the importance of passion, the importance of goal setting. I mean, these are key things in the program. But one user wants to know, how is this different from just your regular purpose, passion, or goal setting course?
It's a fair question. So first of all, I will say that most people who are teaching purpose and passion and goal setting are teaching at the level of psychology. They're not talking about the underlying neurobiology. If you're not talking about neurobiology, you're not talking about mechanism. Right, and if it can train you up in the fundamental mechanisms, everything else snaps into place. It's no longer wishy-washy, it's really, really clear. That's point A. This course will also layers in a flow layer, so the state of optimal performance, right? On top of that, it's layering in not just a grit layer, the 6 levels of grit and the 2 foundational grit precursors. And when you lock all these things together and can work with them in unison, get them all to work for you, that's how you really achieve escape velocity.
There's so much science in here. There's so much practical approach. And there's so many tools and mechanisms because you really wrote the books on these subjects and you studied the world's top performers.
I did, yes.
Now the final...
Look at me.
Now, here's another question. People are really busy. How many hours a day or a week do they have to commit to get the best out of this program?
So that's one of the things that's amazing sort of about the Quest platform in general is, right, it's chunked down into, I think the longest we go in any day, there's one 30-minute lecture, everything else is 20 minutes, and we introduce 3 to 5 concepts a week. Right. So you can really start to get through this in probably about an hour a day maximum, right? Longest in terms of the homework you're gonna have to do after watching the class. It's an amazing...
And that's just for one day. That's like one day that's about an hour.
Yeah, the maximum.
Right.
The maximum. So it's interesting how much benefit you can get from such a little bit of input.
Right, and note that you're not just watching videos, you're actually applying, because one of the key things that help you truly transform is your rate of application, how much you apply what you learn, and Quest is designed to get you to apply so that you build new behaviors. So in a week, you'll be looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 trainings of Stephen, and it's all going to be in the app, and each training is about 20 minutes roughly. So you're looking at about an hour to an hour and a half a week of videos by Stephen, and it goes on for 5 weeks. But in that week, don't forget, there's application, there's community, you're interacting with other students, and that's part of the fun of this program. But I gotta say, I've been watching this program as we've been creating it. I've been hearing from the people in this room, the film crew, and people are so excited about this because of the way you teach, right? We just saw you on stage speaking to 640 people at the auditorium across the hall at Mindvalley University. Mind-blowing stuff. So I know you guys are really, really, really gonna love this. This is gonna be one of those things that after you're done with your gym or your morning breakfast, you just wanna open up your app and go through the lesson. It's gonna be really, really, really powerful. And the time that you spend in this shouldn't even be a question, because remember, the whole point of this program is to 5x your productivity. You are buying time because you're gonna get so much better, so much more effective at what it is that you do. So with that, let's wrap up this masterclass. For all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. Thank you. You've been an incredible teacher. And I cannot wait to see you guys in the Habit of Ferocity Quest on Mindvalley.
Roar.